Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. It is Wednesday, March 6, 2024, right in the middle of our big finale episodes here on Oscar Week. And tonight is our Oscar preview, looking at the races of this year's Academy Awards. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts here for the evening, and I've got nominee here behind me. Emma Stone will be there behind me throughout the show, a nominee tonight for Poor Things. And the hat tonight, some people ask the reasons for the hats that I wear. And with I don't have a Las Vegas Golden Knights hat, but I do have this. You know, all the other champions in 2023, Texas Rangers, Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Nuggets, I don't have those. But I had this, Las Vegas hat. So it's tangentially related to the Vegas Golden Knights who won the Stanley Cup this year. Tonight we're going to be going through mainly discussing 9 of the big categories. I'll do a lightning round of the craft categories later on. We're going to tell you for your Oscar pools who we think will win in each category, and we might disagree, so definitely listen to all of us, who we think should win out of the nominees, and who we think should have been nominated that was not, and again, in 9 of the categories. So my co-host, ladies and gentlemen, first, a Jeopardy champion who swam all the way from Brooklyn to Manhattan, where he taught classical theater history over the winter break to a camp full of musical theater nerds. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Carroll is back.
It was, and my dog. She did not complete the swim with me. Also, it was cold.
I would imagine it would be cold in the middle of March. Also with us, ladies and gentlemen, our own maestro sound designer, who is a philosophical hitman on the side on a mission to kill vampire dictators and Nazi families on picnics. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Poilis is here.
Hello.
He had that look on his face like he didn't really understand all the references in his intro. But, I want to let the audience know that Matt Poilis is doing his first Oscar preview. I think this is your first time doing this particular show. You did 1970 review. You did a top 10. This is your first time doing this show.
I believe it is.
So, guys, here is the schedule for Oscar week. Obviously, it started last night with our top 10 films of 2023. Most of you come straight to this show. So a lot of people watch this show first. They use this show to fill out their Oscar pool ballots. And of course, tomorrow night is the biggest show we do all year, Class Junior Review, where we travel back 25 years to go over the Oscar races of 1998. We had 320 eligible films on the Academy-approved list of films that were released in the calendar year 2023, which means they needed to release into theaters for at least a week. And there's other rules, some of which are related to diversity that applied this year. So 320 films were eligible. And so now we want to find out from these guys how many films they watched out of that 320. Maddie here had the all-time record from 2021 when he did the top 10, not counting Davey and J Money, the OGs, the new crop. The all-time low was last year when Max did a top 10. He watched 14 films out of 302 to craft a top 10 out of those 14 films. And as such, we no longer have Max with us on the show. So hopefully these guys beat that.
So nervous all week, Jonathan, to tell you this number. I don't know if it's high or low. I know what you just said out loud, but I still feel like you're going to judge me for it. But I'm somewhere in the range of 35-ish, 30, 35.
That is a respectable number. You can see there's a lot of people low on this list, that are below that. It's pretty much on par with what most people do. Talia did 36 last night, for example. Jim, how far did you get this year?
Oh my God. I thought I was very worried because I thought I was going to be very low, but I managed to get to 34.
34 it is. And so, that again, on par with Talia and Matt. Matt has 35, you have 34. So that's very respectable. And honestly, what I think you guys may have noticed, and I complain about this all the time, is in the top 9 categories that we are discussing tonight, covers only 15 films. Yeah. Those 9 categories are only spread out around 15 films. So what I believe is those are pretty much only the 15 films that most Academy members have been watching. You know what I mean? Like you probably watched more than most Academy members. So, for what that's worth. So for me, last year I did 100 out of 302. This year I did 103 out of 320. Try to watch as much as I can. Tied for my 4th best. The other question I've got to ask you guys is, biggest movie missed. In other words, if you could watch one more, 36 or 35, what would it be that you just didn't get to? Jim, you first.
One of the ones that I really wanted to see and never got a chance to see was El Conde. It was on my list, and it kept being on my list as always the next one and kept getting bumped, and I just ran out of time for it.
Yeah, and it's not an accessibility issue because it is on Netflix. Maddie P,
Poor Things.
Matt does not go to the theater because he has kids and stuff, but watches most of these on streaming. So that's probably why you miss Poor Things.
That is probably why.
And for me, ladies and gentlemen, the one that I missed that I didn't get to, if I could watch one more, is Dream Scenario. I had a choice between Dream Scenario and another film. I had like $4 left to spend on one or the other, and I chose the other, and I kind of regret it. All right, it's time for the Oscar categories, ladies and gentlemen. And we're starting with Best Cinematography. And I have 0 of these films in my top 5 cinematography. In terms of will win, I believe that Oppenheimer is going to win here, starting what I think is going to be a big night for Oppenheimer, as we'll go over the course of the evening. Does anybody disagree that Oppenheimer is going to win Best Cinematography?
No, that's what I have.
Okay, so Oscar ballot people, we're all in agreement, Oppenheimer. Now we're going to find out who we think should win out of these 5 nominees. Maddie, what do you have that should win for cinematography of 2023?
Let me say Oppenheimer. I don't know if it would even matter, but I consider things like he shot in IMAX, which is like an enormous undertaking, and it turned out amazing despite the challenges that poses for production. That's worth something. A lot of the sequences are pretty straightforward, but also other ones that were more crafty, quite impressive.
I appreciate what you're saying in terms of scope for IMAX, but to me, there's more to cinematography than that. What I look for is like the shaping of light and how they're using it. I see the largeness. It made both the top 10 lists of Kelly and Talia last night, and that's the main thing they talked about. Is they both said it felt like a movie with a capital M, and that was really important to them. And it's just not to me, and I don't really look for that. I tend to appreciate even some of the smaller films for the cinematography. They didn't have the money, and they still were able to find some beauty. Let's see if Jim, how do you feel about Oppenheimer's cinematography? Unless that's also what you have.
I mean, I would also choose Oppenheimer. I don't feel we have to rehash this. It's pretty much the same answers that Matt gave. I thought that they did a really nice job with the expansive, beautiful New Mexico environs. There was really nice stuff with Oppenheimer in the close-ups, with his world shifting. There's some interesting choices there.
I wouldn't call Oppenheimer bad cinematography like I would 2 of these. I would say I was underwhelmed. I didn't think it advanced the narrative very much. I appreciate the technical skill a little, but I'm certainly not very passionate about the cinematography for it.
I agree with both of your points about small movies being just as valid. Also, that light shaping is certainly a huge component of it, not just scope of production value. So I don't disagree with either.
My choice for should win here, and again, I don't really love the cinematography of this one, but so for lack of a better choice, I chose Hoyt van Hoytema for Killers of the Flower Moon. It's not that it looked as bad as some of these other films, because I didn't think it looked special, but it did, however, look appropriate for its time and place, which I really appreciate, with all the light being motivated and, yes, shaped, to me more so than Oppenheimer. It's cinematography determined by the story instead of the other way around, which I feel like for 3 of these nominees, they prioritize cinematography over story in some cases. I've got Killers of the Flower Moon, Maddie P.
I do like the comment, though, that it's appropriate for the story. In other words, the craft is embedded into the content, not sort of as a layer on top that they decided to make it cool for whatever reason. So I do like that.
Jim, Killers of the Flower Moon cinematography.
My choice was really between those 2 movies.
Now we're going to be talking about should have been nominated that was not. Jim.
So the movie that I picked was really I think this was what I left the movie with, was the very striking visuals. I also felt that the visuals did a really good job of serving the story, of creating a sense of setting and place, and that was The Creator. It all looked beautiful and dreamy in a way that I think was very on point for the movie. In dealing with artificial life and artificial intelligence and the lines that blur between what is real and what is not real. Coming out of it, that was what I really keyed into.
Greg Fraser, who shot Dune, that Maddie and I were talking about off camera. It's an A-list cinematographer for sure. Most of my notes relate to the story, the acting, the directing, the editing. I have some issues with a lot of those elements. I do comment on how technically impressive it was. My notes don't reflect the cinematography directly, but it does feel like there's a lot of visual treat. And I do like that they used a lot of symbolism within the cinematography, a lot of use of iconography and metaphor. That I appreciate. So it's not really a hard no, but it didn't rise to the top cinematography wise for me that I was thinking about. Maddie P, did you get a chance to see The Creator?
A little bit of it. I started at one point. I just fell off it for, I don't remember exactly why.
And that'll bring us right to Maddie's should have been nominated. That was not.
I think Asteroid City was great for this category. I loved watching it, the visuals of it. If you don't like Wes Anderson's humor, which I know you don't often, JB, the cinematography serves that and creates that in many cases.
You might be pleased to know it didn't sniff my top 10, but I mean, it might make my top 5 Wes Anderson films, for a director that I don't like. It's so unique, the cinematography. I don't love it. I'm not going to lie, like from a cinematography point of view. The films are so interchangeable from that perspective specifically. It's not appealing to my eye, not as visually interesting. The things we're talking about, lighting, there's depth of frame that he uses for the story and things like that. But in terms of like shaping the lighting and the actual, beauty painting quality of the images, I don't feel it as much. Jim, Asteroid City, do you see it?
I did. And I really do like Wes Anderson, and this was not one of my favorite Wes Anderson films. It's definitely like all of Wes Anderson's movies. It's visually striking, unique, and you either ride that train or you don't.
Just a quick note, you said something to the effect of, well, it's like as all his other ones, and so therefore doesn't stand out as anything notable. I would say, and the counterpoint is, he's essentially created his own genre of movie and a vocabulary of cinematography. And so the fact that he reuses his own dictionary of shots and stylization, I don't think is a detriment. I think he's done quite a bit of influence in the film industry.
I see that point of view, and he's famous for his fast dollies. That's on sets that a lot of ACs are always talking about the dollies in Wes Anderson films and the speed of them. I don't disagree with that, but if you don't like visually that language, you know what I mean, then
it's
you feel the same way about all of them. Jim, it sounds like you agree on that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a 100% accurate statement, is that he's sort of created his own playbook, his own language. I think that he was maybe taking a swing for the fences here. Like, he was trying to push it even further of everything, with the story, with the animation, with the artifice. A Wes Anderson movie of a Wes Anderson movie. Maybe in pushing it, it loses something. He's been closer and better with his own language. And I think maybe in the trying something new, he either needs to develop it further, or he needs to say, okay, well, this is an experiment and I need to pivot back to this.
Okay, so guys, that's going to bring to my should have been nominated, that was not, and it's an indie film out of Africa, so you guys probably didn't see it. It's a film called Mami Wata, W-A-T-A. It's extremely gorgeous with a excellent use of stark, high contrast, black and white cinematography that works so much better in this film than it does in a lot of others that try black and white. Between its exploration about the pros and cons of religion and faith, but also the discovery of feminism in this remote society, there's a lot going on in this very deep, very cinematic, visually breathtaking piece. For me, guys, Mami Wata is my favorite cinematography of 2023. Is there any chance you guys saw Mami Wata?
Did not get to that one.
I assume so. So, Matty P, between Asteroid City and Oppenheimer, what's your favorite cinematography?
Let's go for it. Let's do Asteroid City just to say it.
Jim, between The Creator and Oppenheimer, what's your favorite cinematography of the year?
I'd still probably go Oppenheimer.
Moving on to Best Adapted Screenplay. Out of these 5 nominees, I've got a half of a nominee here. I feel like one of my best screenplays of the year is in this category, and I put it in original, as did the Writers Guild, incidentally. So I'm not alone in this. In terms of what will win, this one is a real race. And since the Writers Guild Awards isn't until April because of the strike, our most reliable precursors aren't available to us. Many websites are predicting Oppenheimer as part of the sweep. But me personally, reading the tea leaves, I'm predicting an upset. On one hand, this is the opportunity to give an award to Greta Gerwig after the directing omission. But there is a lot of confusion about its inclusion in this category versus original, where it is nominated at the Writers Guild. And so I don't think American Fiction is such a left field choice. I feel like its momentum is building, it's socially relevant, and many people feel that the strength of satire is in a screenplay. It doesn't have a chance in any of the other categories, so this feels like a place for its admirers to really get behind it. So Oscar pool people, fair warning, this is a kind of a risk right now, but I don't think that much of one. Does anybody agree on American Fiction? All right. So everybody agrees that American Fiction is going to win, right? Will win.
I don't have nearly as many words as you had, but I definitely put it in my will win category.
Okay, just making sure. Jim will win?
I want to believe that it's going to win. I really think it should win. I really love this movie. I 100% agree with the statement that you said before, that the satire is in the screenplay. It does such a good job turning the story in different directions, in different unexpected directions, and also being very clear in how it's presenting itself. It is a brilliant screenplay.
Out of the 10 Best Picture nominees, this would be my 4th favorite, so it's like a net positive, probably a top 20 film for me. It did not make my top 10. It did make both Talia and Kelly's top 10. It was Talia's number 1 film, of 2023. So my issues with it are quibbles, but my quibble is potentially a screenplay issue. As I acknowledged last night, it's either a script or an edit issue in that the satire was very sharp and very effective. However, I feel like the balance between that satire, that sort of heightened tone, and the more grounded family dynamics, and I like that they were both in there, but either the script or the edit didn't find the right balance. I found that the shift sometimes very disconcerting. Sometimes you complain about something being on rails, but I think when you're watching a movie, you don't want to be jolted, feel like those transitions are happening in an uncomfortable way. It's a tricky tone to balance, both in terms of direction, scripting, editing, wherever it happened, but there is a balance issue. What I wrote here is it's an issue of ratio, like a recipe that uses a tad too much salt. And I say a tad. It's still good, still edible, but just like slightly salty. Acknowledge the strengths. I definitely think it's strong. I had a minor quibble with the script in particular. Maddie P, I know I used too many words. What do you think about American Fiction, or is that also your choice?
I said it should win as well. You guys covered it so well. I did think it should win.
I think quibbles are fine to have.
Thanks.
If there's a touch too much salt, that comes down to maybe a personal experience. It didn't hit me that way. I was pretty much in the whole time, but I am interested to find out what your should win is.
Look at that segue. He's like, I'm done talking. I want to move on with the evening. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is a film that, I don't think belongs in this category, but if they're going to put it here, I'm going to select it. And I think, I think the reason it's going to lose is because people are confused. But like I said, if they put it here, I'm going to vote for Barbie here. And I personally think it's stronger satirically than American Fiction. I think it's thorough. I think it's clever. I think it's inventive, occasionally overwritten, but no worse than any of these other nominees. Should win in this category, and one of my top 5 original screenplays of the year. Maddie P.
I think it's a great choice. I think it also is very effective satirically. Nothing wrong with that choice.
Jim, Barbie.
That is my runner-up in this category.
Okay, so guys, that's what should have been. Still no clean sweeps yet, although they've agreed, I think, in both categories for what should win so far. And I've been the odd man out. Let's see what these guys said should have been nominated. That was not. Best Adapted Screenplay, Maddie P.
Well, I can't say that. Some of these snubs, they're more of well, why not? And not that I love them more than the others, or for example. So in this case, it's why wasn't Killers of the Flower Moon in there? So I said that was kind of snubbed.
I was shocked. It's not my choice, but I was shocked that it wasn't, given the momentum and given it's one of the 15 films that they watched.
Yeah, I appreciate it because it was a different kind of antagonist than a typical Scorsese, De Niro type of thing. It had a subtler but more menacing quality to it. Appreciate it for that element.
It did not make my top 5 adapted screenplays, but I acknowledge it is an achievement, especially in the art of adaptation. It's such a dense, comprehensive, documentarian kind of book. And Eric Roth, I've called the best living screenwriter. And he's very good at that and consolidating that information. Really hard to do. It's a film that just missed my top 10, so I didn't really consider it here. Jim, anything on Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yeah, I don't want to be the bad guy again. I really liked the David Gran book. Knowing the book the way that I do, I don't know if it was adapted in the spirit of the book. The movie centered really on the Leonardo DiCaprio perspective. I really wish they had gone from the Native American perspective.
Yeah, you would have done it differently. I get that. And just so the audience knows, Jim reads more than Matt or I do, so we wouldn't have that perspective. All right, Jim, so it is your turn for what should have been nominated that was not.
So I went with All of Us Strangers. It was an incredibly compelling screenplay. A little bit of a mystery box where what is happening, how is this all fitting together, but one where you really follow the main character through that. You get attached to him as the scenes unfold. It becomes a very personal, intimate story you become a witness to. I do think there was a lot of beautiful things in that screenplay. I think there were a lot of hard things in that screenplay, but at the end, I thought it was a very successful screenplay.
Glad you brought it up. I wasn't going to. It didn't fit into any of the categories for me, but it was my number 10 film of 2023. But a lot of things I liked about it were Andrew Hayes' direction. It's some, from a directorial point of view, scene work point of view, I feel like it's very beautiful, deeply felt work. Its approach is almost Bergman-esque, I think, in terms of the central thesis. And I think the inability to really connect with someone until you're able to confront your trauma, which is a constant battle. But also its magical realism sort of reminded me of Field of Dreams, but with an artsier, more personal approach. The other thing I was thinking about with the film is loneliness. And how do we cope with that? In this case, the creative type invents a reality to be loved, and maybe that's okay. And as long as he perceives love, What's the difference? The thing that brought it down to number 10 instead of higher in the film is there was an incompleteness a little bit, its limitation in scope, in that it really doesn't explore how that overactive imagination might impact the here and now. I appreciate reveries as part of like an escape or dealing with that loneliness. As beautiful as that invention is, it could have serious consequences on the outside world unless one is a complete shut-in. Did not make my top 5 screenplays, but it'd be definitely top 10. Matty P, anything on All of Us Strangers?
Haven't seen it.
Jim, any rebuttal on anything I said?
There is the line, if I'm lonely, it's not because I'm gay. That is the thesis of the whole movie.
Okay, so that brings us to my choice for should have been nominated. And it allows me the opportunity to talk about one of the big trends I noticed in 2023 that didn't come up last night. There's a sudden obsession with stories about the rise and fall of businesses. Dumb Money, The Beanie Bubble, Pain Hustlers, Tetris, and to some degree, even the Iron Claw and Killers of the Flower Moon could fall into this category, albeit slightly more tangentially. There seems to be a real concern about the loopholes of capitalism. But in that exploration, it's also notable that all of these wrongdoers got caught. It's not just an American issue, however, as the strongest of these films actually comes from Canada. And I'm referring to the film Blackberry, which is my choice for the best adapted screenplay of the year. The film covers similar thematic and narrative ground as those other films, but is significantly more interesting and compelling, and it does so by doing something most of those other films failed to do, focusing on character, and without sacrificing the facts and figures on what transpired. It effectively communicates the character arcs that greatly affected the fortunes of the company, both good and bad. There's a lot of positive takeaways from the story as opposed to those other films. This is a story that respects the innovation, the business awareness one needs to coincide with the tech side, but also the dangers of desperation, both in terms of the legal threats from the SEC and the design threats from Apple, which brought out the worst in all the characters because they were ruled by their fears. They had so much success that they found themselves untouchable, and that thought might be what broke them. I had low expectations for this one given the Canadian film market and the precedent set by the aforementioned films, but this film tackled all of my complaints about those other films and essentially proved me right. This works a hell of a lot better, strong structure and character driven. Guys, I've got Blackberry. Any chance you guys saw the indie Blackberry about the rise and fall of the Blackberry company?
I didn't.
I lived it. I lived it enough to see the movie.
So for me, Blackberry is my favorite adapted screenplay of the year. Matty P, between Killers of the Flower Moon and American Fiction, what's your choice?
American Fiction.
Jim, All of Us Strangers or American Fiction?
I'd probably go American Fiction.
Moving right along, it is time for our other screenplay category, the one that these guys are probably more excited about. Best Original Screenplay. Believe it or not, I have 2 of these 5 in my top 5 original screenplays. In terms of will win, I'm going to say Anatomy of a Fall here is going to win. It's leading the odds. It won the Golden Globe. It's a Best Picture nominee without an international film nomination, which is France's fault. And so this is a place to honor that and tell France that they're mad. It's also leading in all the predictor polls. Does anybody disagree that Anatomy of a Fall will win?
Nope.
All right,
like
Matty P. Matty P is a dissenting opinion. What do you think will win?
Well, I like your rationale, especially about the French placement of it. However, I feel like Maestro will win. I just feel like they're going to want to give him and it's something, and this is a good one to go for. Not a strong argument necessarily, just I feel like it's a likely outcome.
Oscar poll people, you have a choice there. 66.6% of us feel Anatomy of a Fall is going to win, and Matty feels like Maestro has a shot here. So now we're going to what we think should win out of the 5, and Matty P, you get to go first. Out of these 5, what should win?
Wrote down Anatomy of a Fall. I really enjoyed the trial dialogue and sort of the sort of emotional aspect to the logic and deductive reasoning. I enjoyed that whole element of that movie.
Did not make my top 10. It was Kelly's number 1 film of 2023. There's a lot of films that would make my top 20, and this is one of them. It's not my choice for should win, but it's my second favorite. So it is the other one that I feel like should have been nominated. It is in my top 5. It feels so honest and real. It was an actual court case, so it feels so well researched, so natural, so organic, extremely compelling and detailed. My issues that kept it off the top 10 had more to do with cinematicism, but not the screenplay in general. Jim?
No, I think it's a great screenplay. I would say I was I was left very worried about the French legal system. It was definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. I think the screenplay was a huge part of that. It's smart, it's compelling.
I was drawn to it not because of this twist that was eventually going to come. It's just sort of the moment by moment, and they didn't rely on a movie trick. It was good because it was good.
I definitely agree on that front. So that'll bring us to Jim. What did you choose for should win for best original screenplay?
Yeah, so I actually went with Celine's Song in Past Lives.
I had a feeling you were going to go there. Go ahead.
I think this is a very delicate screenplay. There's a huge commonality. Who hasn't wanted to look up their past and think about what might have been and could it still be? It carries that relationship through a very real and logical path. That is entirely screenplay. I think that has to be baked in at the base level. Celine Song did it really, really well.
Past Lives was Talia's number 2 film of 2023, but it is not a film I liked. I actually have a lot of issues with it. It was lyrical and almost poetic, which I appreciate, but it also left me cold. I don't disagree with you saying about the universality of it. However, I do think the issue lies in the structure of the screenplay. I think the issues are almost dramaturgical, to use a theatrical term. The film references at one point Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What that does, and I feel like should have done here, is instead of giving us 3 little sections, is I feel like it should have been just in the present. We learn about them in hindsight and makes the audience do the work, and we get a sense of their past connection through their reconnection, the way Eternal Sunshine does. We sort of peel the layers of that, like peeling an onion. Another thing that Eternal Sunshine has that this doesn't, for me, is a rooting interest. So I actually just didn't care. I didn't care if they got together or not, or if she stayed with John McGarr, who I think was the strongest performance in the film. So the word that comes to mind, again, is balance. The themes that resonate to me the most are past and culture and how they both relate to identity, how our past experiences define our present self and how much we are in control of that. It might have been more interesting if the husband's character's past was involved somehow in a small way to really make that thematic exploration a little more full, a little more complete. The film was nice. It was sweet. Its flaws are small, but they really added up to prevent me from connecting. A phrase used earlier is at an arm's length, and I found myself totally at an arm's length throughout this movie, not moved.
I did like this movie and the screenplay quite a bit. I liked it, and because of some of the things I think you didn't like about it. Like, some movies are big in scope, apparently, but the best movies are about a smaller idea. This one was small in scope and about something small, meaning like a person and a moment in their life. And like, it's a very small thing, and I appreciated how small art can be and still feel important.
And you'd think I would like that. The distance that it stayed from the characters started to feel more like a stylization all its own.
It has to work forward linearly because you have to see where these characters are at the stages in their lives. The story's really about the differences that they have between 12 and 24 and 36, where they're at in their own lives.
Aesthetic differences just from the core of us as artistic people.
Yeah.
So I completely disagree in the sense that I think it's more compelling and more cinematic if we're in the present and we feel that in the past and are allowed to infer.
I think it's also funny that Celine Song is a playwright, and I have a much bigger theater background than you do,
right,
and I'm connecting with her on that.
And it felt that way. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
100%.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to have 3 different choices here in the original screenplay category out of these 5 nominees. And this is another film that made my top 10 list last night, number 9. I was really fascinated by the layers of May December. On one hand, it's an exploration of love and age that winds up with a reminder of maybe what we suspected all along. Add to that many traumas, the coping, and also how art can help, but also trigger. And we can't forget this element, which also explores the artistic process in a captivating way, and also the inherent problems when recreating the lives of real living people. The responsibility to them, but also how that might sometimes contradict with your responsibility to the truth. I was invested on an academic level, and in that sense, it feels like one of the more accomplished scripts of the year. It's clearly smart and deep, well worth the watch to me. I've got May December here in this category.
I appreciate that movie as well. I liked it quite a bit. The layers that it tries to navigate are notable, and I agree with that assessment. So it's a good choice.
Jim, for me, so much going on May December.
Yeah, it's funny because you were kept at arm's length for Past Lives. I appreciate May December. I felt very much at arm's length for the thing. And it just, I think the subject matter in general kind of keeps me a little bit distant to it. There would be moments where I would connect with it, and then I'd kind of drop out, and I'd have to keep reconnecting with it.
So much going on, and it had the balance that, Past Lives to me did not, for example. So that brings us to what should have been nominated that was not. So, Maddie, what should have been nominated here that was not?
You know what I'll do? I'll just do Asteroid City for everything that I don't have a better answer for.
As I intimated earlier, I did find this effort more enjoyable than most. At Moonrise Kingdom, I think, remains my favorite, possibly because it was more personal. This also had shades of quirk for quirk's sake, but less so. I actually liked the play within the play. It made the whole thing more palatable somehow. But My main issue with it is it started to get muddled in terms of themes. I felt like it was a clear on a film about connection and communication, possibly in the age post-COVID. By extension, it was therefore about loneliness and isolation. But then some of those elements in the film's final moments force-fed us in the form of repetition. It didn't seem to gel in the same way. That last 10, 15 minutes really lost me. Like, there are a lot of scenes that felt superfluous or random. They probably aren't. Maybe I'm missing something in terms of the themes. There are things that I thought I was getting, and things that I was confused by. So it's a net positive for me. I had enough quibbles, but that's generally true of Wes Anderson. But certainly, I liked it better than a lot of Wes Anderson films, particularly the screenplay.
I mean, I feel like I'm in the same boat with you. I think it's a mostly positive for me. It's a good script. It's a good ride. It's just wasn't to the level of the other choices for me.
Net positive from you about a Wes Anderson movie, I'll take.
Jim, what do you have for should have been nominated that was not?
I chose Air.
It was nominated at the Writers Guild, for what it's worth.
To make a movie about sneaker manufacturing and to make it compelling, I think is an achievement by itself. I think it did a really good job of balancing your investment in the person with where you are in the storyline. I think it had a lot of different plates spinning in the air and it kept you engaged in all of them.
When I talked about Blackberry, I forgot to mention Air in this list of films that talk about the rise and fall of businesses. It takes us inside this back room. I guess it would be on the higher end of that because the Beanie Bubble and Paint Pot Hustlers didn't work. Dumb Money was terrible. So I guess it'd be the higher end of that, not as good as Blackberry to me. I was just fascinated that I felt like there were no stakes. I didn't care. And it comes down to this level of emotional investment. If Michael Jordan didn't sign it, like, I didn't really feel like it was going to be the end of the world.
It was the end of his career.
I understand that on an academic level, but I didn't feel it on a visceral level. Let me ask you, did you see the film Tetris on Apple Plus?
I didn't.
It's exactly the same idea. You feel it, the desperation, the personal investment, literally his own money. The structure is similar from that point of view, but also there's a life or death quality to it as well, you know, behind the Iron Curtain, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's why the stakes felt higher. But to me, like, it was a fun ride. But it was fluffy to me. Like, it didn't feel like the stakes were that high. Like, he seemed like a really smart, intelligent guy. So if Michael Jordan didn't sign the shoe, like, I felt like he was gonna like land on his feet somewhere else. Like, he wasn't so worried about Sonny Vaccaro. Like, it was fine. Matty P, any chance you saw Air?
I did, and I liked it a lot. It was really fun to watch, especially in the 80s nostalgia. It was really fun, that intro. But I kind of think about this movie in a similar way as Social Network. Do I care about this movie because it's about a subject matter that is big and important, and so therefore I want to see how it developed or how it turns out? Or is it a good movie anyway, and it just happens to be about a big thing? This movie, I feel like I loved watching it. I really enjoyed it, but I do think that it relies on Nike being a thing we know and care about now, and it's an enjoyable journey. But I think that's probably where it falls flat, is it's like just that product.
That's an interesting point of view that hadn't occurred to me, but I agree. Like, I laughed a lot, I admit, Jim.
I don't disagree with anything that's been said.
Just the amount of weight we put on things. You know, to me, the lack of conflict weighed it down, and you found it as a plus.
Yeah. I think I was a little bit more drawn into the personal stakes for Sonny Vaccaro.
Matty P earlier talked about family films, and so that's where I'm going to go here. It's actually my third favorite original screenplay of the year because, like, as I mentioned, my second was actually the nominated Anatomy of a Fall. But this film did make my top 10 last night, ahead of May, December, and obviously ahead of Anatomy of a Fall. But it drew much ire from Talia and Kelly, who hated Elemental. To me, the animated films seem to take more time with these scripts. They have more time to develop them because the animation takes so long. I think it shows in the structure. There's such an elegance fundamentally without ever feeling like it. I often tell my students to be structured, but to hide the structure so the audience doesn't feel the mechanics. Elemental did it, to me, very successfully. I grant you that the theme of inclusion is a little on the nose, but somehow, almost unfortunately, very relevant. Its approach towards relationships is heartbreakingly honest, addressing issues related to modern masculinity and femininity. I found the film and the script really touching, intelligent, inventive, and with an excellent wholeness of world. I really loved Elemental, and I got really raked across the coals for it by the girls. Did anybody see Elemental, Disney's animated film from the summer? Yes, both family men did. Matty P, you're first. Elemental.
So I like the movie overall, and I think I like what you said about it. There's nothing that I disagree with, but as I was watching it, I kept feeling like Pixar is turning into DreamWorks circa 2000, trying to be Pixar, but it already is Pixar, but DreamWorks is always trying to be people copying Pixar for the last several decades try to be as clever as Pixar, Pixar just does it naturally, organically, and it feels like it's native to the content, whereas everyone else makes puns all the time based on whatever fish or ant or whatever's happening. This movie is pun and clever at all costs.
Those things felt shoehorned and forced.
A little bit inserted. Not that they were bad, there were just so many of them. But otherwise, I did like the storyline and the characters, and I enjoyed the movie. I just kept on being like, why are they doing this so much?
Jim, Elemental.
It's a great movie. Why were you raked over the coals?
Oh, they thought it was terrible. I can't remember the exact arguments that they made, but they just thought it didn't work at all.
So I remember walking out really liking Elemental, also being like, well, was it a Finding Nemo?
But you know what, Jim? To me, it was.
Too.
To me, this had a lot more going on, both in terms of from a social perspective, the issues that we have with globalism and immigration, and for an animated film to have this extra layer about modern relationships in a meaningful way. Because what we look for in films, what I look for in films is entertainment for sure, but also meaning. And if you can combine those two in a way that really, and I'm pretty cynical, so if it hits my heartstrings, like I think there's something to be said there. Somebody's doing something right. So it is at that Finding Nemo level to me. What is your favorite original screenplay of the year? Anatomy of a Fall or Asteroid City?
Let's go with Anatomy of a Fall.
Jim, Past Lives or Air?
Past Lives.
For me, May December is my best original screenplay of the year. All right, time to talk about the acting categories, kids. And Jim is our resident actor, so he may have some things to say about this, starting with supporting actor. And I've got 2 of these 5 in my top 5 supporting actors of the year. And finally, we have a slam dunk in terms of predictions. Robert Downey Jr. has won everything and will win Sunday night. I say, take it to the bank. Does anyone dare disagree with me?
I think Robert Downey Jr. will win for supporting.
Great. Then we are all agreed. And I will start here because I actually think he should win. We'll get into it deeper later on, and I don't want to litigate it here about how much I hated the film Oppenheimer. I can say 2 good things about it: the score and Robert Downey Jr. As plugged in as I am into the industry, I did not know he was in this movie coming into it, and I had no idea it was him while I was watching it. Not until the credits did I realize. And I was thinking during the movie, wow, who is this actor? Why aren't all the other actors this good? The makeup obviously does a lot to make that work, but his choices are made through the makeup, not because of them. It's a thorough transformation, both physically and emotionally, near perfect work. It's a masterclass in technique, as Kelly says, and that overcomes a director that is clearly awful with actors. Because every other performance in this movie is so ridiculously, laughably awful and shapeless and hollow, this performance stands out more. Prototypical supporting performance that's exquisitely executed. I have always been able to separate my feelings about a film versus my feelings about a performance. I do feel like this is the best performance of the year, even though I have a lot of ire towards the film. Matty P, anything on Robert Downey Jr.?
I said much more succinctly, but I said a very similar thing where that it's away from his normal persona, both physically and personality-wise. So I totally agree with that assessment. But in that universe of him being different than himself, it's pretty steady in one note throughout. So it wasn't like a big dynamic performance, although he had definitely really nice moments, mostly just because it was a departure for him. And it's hard for him to get away from himself in movies. And he did it here.
He can thoroughly disappear into a role. I also did not realize it was Robert Downey Jr. I really did think he did a wonderful job with this role. I think he should win too. You gave a great defense.
So Jim and I have Robert Downey Jr. Finally, somebody agrees with me on something. Matty P, who is your choice for should win in this category?
I said Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction. I liked the cast overall in that movie. The scenes he was in, I was drawn to him more than the others. He sort of drew my attention. That's why.
Obviously, I've had some nice things to say about American Fiction. In terms of my role of playing the bad guy, I want to go back to my notes. And it's not personal. This is what I wrote immediately after watching it. I continue to find Sterling K. Brown painfully false. I've heard from friends and colleagues that he's a super sweet, hardworking guy, but that doesn't change the fact that I don't believe him as a drug-addled, recently gay man dealing with childhood trauma any more than I did a body-obsessed father in Waves. Throughout his career, I've always found his acting extremely apparent and a major distraction here in an otherwise good film. The worst part about the movie, to me, is Sterling K. Brown. In fairness, Matt, I've never, ever liked Sterling K. Brown in any movie. I actually think he is really weak. I am not seeing him as his ability to transform. The acting is just so obvious to me. It just feels so false. Jim, as the actor, you'd be the tiebreaker here.
I also thought of the principal cast, he was my least favorite actor in the movie.
Did you believe his drug addiction, his homosexuality, or his childhood trauma? Any of those things?
He was not as strong. I will be very diplomatic.
Very
He was
diplomatic.
not as strong in that role.
Matty P, I apologize. I do feel strongly about Sterling K. Brown.
What you're saying makes sense. Was he believable in those exact ways? And maybe that's what should have occurred to me first for all acting. But in this case, it was just personality, sort of magnetism.
It's like extremely likable.
Yeah.
Like, there's
so
no
I
doubt
guess
about that.
I was drawn to that element as opposed to analyzing the believability of his backstory.
Okay, so we're going to move on here to who should have been nominated that was not. Jim.
I went with Milo Machado Grenier for Anatomy of a Fall. It is very unusual to find a child actor with that much facility, just in terms of skill. Believing him and his performance is the linchpin to the movie succeeding.
I agree that it's a good performance, but I disagree with everything that you said that came after it. I disagree that it's the linchpin of the movie. There's so many elements of the movie that work. The screenplay is the one we've talked about a lot. Child performances are tricky in terms of evaluating. When I'm looking at these things, I'm looking at the choices that the actor made, the craft of acting. And to me, this felt like very coached performance, appropriately so. But it felt like a performance that you cut around, and like you often do with children. You want them to do less is more, and you capture the moments that is less. You don't ask too much of them. It's mostly understated. It worked for the movie. I agree that part. But in terms of the craft of acting, I wouldn't shortlist him. I think his character arc is important. That's a screenplay thing.
I also agree that I was confused by some of your comments, Jim, about this character being so integral to the success of the movie. It was about everything else around him, and he kind of glued some things together. For his performance, I agree with what you said, Jonathan, about it feeling a little coached. To me, I just felt like he was kind of looking like off screen, is now the time to do this, or what should I do now? And feeling that sort of outside the frame influence a little bit, as opposed to everyone else who's totally organic, totally verite, having a moment in life. He felt the most directed in the moment.
Behind his lines, there was intention and motivation. And maybe that was after 27 takes.
And not only that, but think about the choice. Obviously it's in the script, but giving him those contacts, it takes away this tool that an actor has that he doesn't have to worry about. That in and of itself is helping by this character. His eyes can never betray him.
Yeah.
Matt Poilis, what is your choice for should have been nominated that was not?
I said Charles Melton for May December. I wasn't appreciating it at the time, and it feels kind of basic and straightforward. But then I just sort of remembered the silent things he's dealing with and going through in that movie, but then they are apparent.
He was nominated for a Golden Globe. He won some Critics Awards, so you are not alone.
I'm just alone today.
I don't know what Jim's going to feel, but it is interesting. Going back to my notes, the whole ensemble is really strong and natural, with the exception of the performance I was hearing the most about.
Yay.
I found Charles Melton to be extremely false in his more challenging moments and dully muted in the rest. It feels like a performance the director had to work around, because Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore are borderline transcendent. But yeah, he did not work for me in a movie that made my top 10. It was my number 9 film of last night, as you recall, and I talked about the screenplay. If I had a quibble, it was pretty much Charles Melton. Jim?
Again, I'll take the middle. I agree with you that he was, Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman, it's hard to be near them. Put a light bulb next to the sun.
But I don't think it's just about comparison. I'm looking at moments. He had a lot of moments to himself, and I just didn't buy him. Especially given what he's been through, it felt I didn't feel that backstory in his gait. Julianne Moore carries her trauma with her, regardless of this. Not about just being in the same scene with her, but you sense her as a complete person, and not so much to me.
I didn't walk away thinking about Charles Melton. I don't think the performance offended me or turned me off. It wasn't at the level of the others in the movie.
But it could have been and should have been, given what was going on. The character was there. What I sometimes say is there's crumbs left on the table, too many. He left a messy plate. Talk about the comparison, Jim, but it can work in the opposite too, and it often does. What is the tall ship rises all boats, or
the rising tide raises all ships, or something? Yeah.
It works like that more often than this, where a performance fades in comparison. Usually that good acting makes the ensemble better, but not so much in this case.
You said something a second ago that he didn't feel like a full person like Julianne Moore did. I would say he's not a full person. That's kind of the problem with what he's going through. He is doing a lot of internal conflict resolution on a daily basis. That's internal, right? Not an external thing. So it's hard to film that. And if he did externalize it to the degree that maybe it's actually happening, it would seem theatrical and maybe false on that end, on that front. So I think what I liked about it in hindsight is that the sort of basic nature of it betrays what's happening inside in a way that feels kind of organic and truthful.
I hear what you're saying from a character development point of view, that because his growth as a character was stunted. But what I'm saying is you feel the acting or the attempt at acting. It's time for my choice, and this will be quick because neither of these guys saw this film for a supporting actor. I'm going to return to Blackberry and actor Glenn Howerton, who plays Jim Balsillie, the business side of this yin and yang partnership that changed the world, albeit briefly. Howerton goes all in with a balls to the wall, lived-in portrayal of a clearly difficult but also intelligent man, the kind with his own sort of God complex that comes from a deeper, darker sense of insecurity. I mentioned the emphasis on the character in the script, and that pays off for Howerton here. It's a good script, a good part, and he knocked it out of the park. Some excellent work that practically carries the movie for me. I've got Glenn Howerton. He's an Indie Spirit Award nominee and supporting as well.
From It's Always Sunny. I think he's a great actor. So this does not surprise me at all.
I don't really know him.
I did not know him until this movie, and he really blew me away. It was very impressive. And for me, out of those two, though, I do prefer Robert Downey Jr. as the best supporting actor of the year. Jim, do you have Robert Downey Jr. or do you have the kid in Anatomy of a Fall?
I like the kid in Anatomy of a Fall.
I appreciate how meekly you said that. For Matty P, is it Sterling K. Brown or Charles Melton?
Your two least favorite actors.
Kind of.
Let's say Sterling K. Brown.
Let's move on to the next category, supporting actress, in a category that I think is really weak, which I'll get to. I do, though, have one of these five in my top 5 supporting actresses of the year that I'll get to shortly. In terms of who show in, we got another slam dunk here. Da'Vine Joy Randolph has yet to lose. I feel strongly that she won't for the holdovers. Does anybody disagree?
Nope.
She will win, is what I'm saying.
Are you also saying she should?
I did say that as well.
All right, so you start us then.
Every time she was on screen, she confidently carried herself and the scene. Somewhat subtle performance, but also dynamic in that it emotes many complex things happening.
She wasn't bad, but I didn't think she was special or good. Amongst these nominees, she stands out maybe a little bit. I can name 15 or 20 stronger supporting performances to me. The main thing I think she's missing is she doesn't convince me of the grief. Like in some of those moments of, having lost that's like, I understand it academically what happened and like people process grief differently, but I never really truly felt it. And we talk about that dichotomy a lot, that, the academic understanding of it or the visceral understanding. And I didn't really feel that life underneath that, the pain, like, again, it was sort of like a less is more approach, which I normally like, but when I see the less is more, I want to see what's going on under the eyes. I want to see them carry it around in their gait or their approach or other ways they communicate that isn't in the script. And I didn't feel that here. Jim, Da'Vine Joy Randolph.
I did like her in the holdovers. I also kind of agree with you, Jonathan, in that she's at the top of a weaker category. She is also my choice for should win. I wasn't blown over by any of these performances.
I was floored by one, which I'll get to, but not this one.
The reason that I liked her performance was I thought it was right for the movie.
I disagree with that.
Did to me feel like she was carrying around the weight of her son a little bit through those scenes. I actually thought that she did a great job.
Just that it was a similar process to the Charles Melton thing, where when she first started getting nods and nominations, like, oh, really, that character or whatever, and I was like, why is that? And it made me just rethink it and like see what people are seeing in it.
But there was one performance that I thought was excellent. One thing that I mentioned a couple times that I'm able to do is separate a movie that I dislike intensely and the performance. We talked about that with Oppenheimer. Last night, The Color Purple made Talia's top 10. It was also Kelly's worst film of 2023. While I also really disliked the film, like Oppenheimer, it had one strength, and to me, it was Danielle Brooks. And that, to me, is a performance that not only stood out to me when I saw it on Broadway, but stood out to me when I saw it here. She gives such meaningful depth to Sophia, stealing every scene she's in, even when she's not speaking. She only really has the one song, which isn't really a showstopper. It's not about her singing like it is with the others. To me, it's a real crafted, dimensional performance in a movie that lacked otherwise. So I'm going to go to Jim first because I imagine he's got very specific thoughts on this.
You kind of brought it up. I didn't especially care for The Color Purple, the movie. That I think might be coloring my memory of her performance.
And you're not alone. Like, a lot of people feel like they can't make that distinction. I'm looking for the acting choices.
And I think that's very fair. And it's the way that it should be.
Okay, Matty Poilis. I've got Danielle Brooks in The Color Purple.
I didn't see it.
That brings us to who should have been nominated that was not. And we've yet to have any clean sweeps so far tonight. And we've obviously won in this for should have been nominated. Matty P, who should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress that was not?
Well, I don't know if this is the appropriate category, but I said Julianne Moore.
She is my second supporting actress of the year. So I don't have her, but I have her right after who I have, which I'll get to. But yes, excellent performance.
I mean, she did exactly what I think you thought the male character didn't do, which is she externalized all that stuff in a very visceral, emotional, film acty way, and it was great.
You gotta love those film acty ways. Natalie Portman's good. It's Julianne Moore who steals the movie, offering one of the more complicated, interesting portrayals of a broken person that I interpret as being an extreme denial. So I just really thought this was a really deep, thought out, carefully modulated performance, layers upon layers upon layers, without ever feeling forced or false. Jim, Julianne Moore in May, December.
She never occurred to me as a supporting actress.
She did receive a Golden Globe nomination and Indie Spirit Award nomination in the supporting category.
She is an amazing actress. She does an amazing job with this movie. Absolutely. It's a solid pick.
So that's Maddie. We have some agreement there. Jim, who did you choose for Best Supporting Actress? Who should have been nominated that was not?
So I went like 180 degrees from Julianne Moore. And I went with Rosamund Pike in Saltburn. You have to understand that she is smart and vapid, morally bankrupt, and yet holds all of these traditions. She holds all of these opposite qualities. She has to be attractive and repulsive. It is such a narrow line to walk, and to ride a character along that way is incredibly challenging. And I think that she pulled it off brilliantly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. The word brilliantly might be an overstatement for me. I'm not disappointed with her here. However, all the things you talked about feel like script things. And I understand the actor had to navigate those things. And to your point, I never didn't believe her, but it is, as written, something of a flat character in the sense that she not intended to have the dimension of some of these other characters, because the whole thing is something of an allegory, right? Like right out of Kind Hearts and Coronets. So to your point, she delivers what the movie's asking for 100%. I don't really have a lot of false moments, but diving is judged with the degree of difficulty factored in. And I think for acting, it's the same thing. I understand you think it was hard to navigate, but I do feel like the character had intentionally less dimension because of the nature of the piece, and therefore maybe wasn't as challenging as you might suggest. She was on tone, though, which is a challenge in of itself. So I don't completely disagree, but she wouldn't make a top 10 supporting actresses for me.
Yeah, I like what Jim said about riding the lines between being drawn towards and being repelled from the character, and I think she pulled that off. But yeah, I don't have a ton more to add, but I do like that analysis.
I think you're right in that it is very allegorical. I think that she actually did deliver a little bit more dimension than what was on the page. I think that there was a connecting dimension between occupying these states where it never felt false that she was this person being beautiful and being ugly at the same time. It is way too easy to slip up into being too sympathetic or too easy to hate. Being able to occupy the paradox, the conflict of that, and hold it for so long for her entire movie, I think is a little bit trickier than just what's on the page. You do have to have a fully fleshed character for that.
I was agreeing with you up until that last line almost. That's what I don't see in the performance. The person that I chose for supporting actress of the year, I mean, it's a film that made both my top 10 list last night and Talia's. They one of only two crossovers that we had. And it's amazing to me, some of these supporting actresses or some of these performances that I select over the years from actors that I have not admired in the past. Like a couple years ago, I chose Abigail Breslin, supporting actress of the year. And I never, ever would have thought 5 years ago or 8 years ago that I would have acknowledged an Abigail Breslin performance. And I think the same is true of Rachel McAdams, who has grown into quite a capable talent and has some transcendent moments in Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Moments that you wouldn't quite expect. No bells and whistles to this performance, no makeup or anything special, just an actor doing the emotional work to play a real, living, breathing, regular person with dimension, going through all the struggles and doing so in a way that is evocative. Guys, I've got Rachel McAdams and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Both of you have daughters. I wonder if either of you have seen this film as a result.
I have not seen this film, but I'm glad to hear that Rachel McAdams is doing well.
You're rooting for Rachel McAdams.
I'm rooting for, yeah.
Between the two, Rachel McAdams and Daniel Brooks, I've got Rachel McAdams 1, Daniel Brooks 3 behind Julianne Moore. Maddie P, Julianne Moore, and Davine Joy Randolph.
Julianne Moore.
Jim, Rosamund Pike, or Davine Joy Randolph?
I would actually go Davine Joy Randolph.
Guys, moving on to the leading categories. Here we go. And this category I feel a little better about in terms of the nominees. I actually have 2 of 5 of these in my top 5 best actress. And at one point I had 2 others. Like, I actually think 4 of these 5 are excellent performances, but only 2 made it to my top 5. A month ago, I would have said that if Lily Gladstone didn't win this award, God himself was going to interrupt the ceremony and smite all Oscar voters. However, amazingly, Oscar momentum has shifted significantly. I would have thought that for both the cultural importance of Gladstone's victory, plus the fact that Emma Stone has already won, would work in the former's favor. But Emma Stone is the performance that everyone is talking about, which might have something to do with the release date 2 months later, ye old recency bias, if you will. I think it's close, but the tea leaves are currently saying Emma Stone, which I can't believe that I'm saying. I wouldn't be an honest prognosticator if I didn't accurately report that. Vegas has shifted their odds as well. Does anybody disagree that Emma Stone's going to win here?
No.
Annette Bening, I thought, might have a better chance, just because maybe she should win by now or whatever.
There's certainly physical demands to that role, so I can see that. And she's got, out of all these people, she's got the most nominations without winning out of
Right.
these 5. Jim and I think Emma Stone's going to win, so I'm going to start, because as shocked as I am by thinking that she will win, I actually too would vote for Emma Stone. I find myself rooting for Gladstone, who got knocked out of my top 5 in the last few days. I found myself rooting for her from an inclusion point of view, but as a film reviewer and analyzer, I do feel like, from the point of view of the craft of acting, to me, Emma Stone does give the best performance of the year in this category. This is another movie that I did not admire, but I think it's a tour de force performance. Stone's creation of Bella is extremely creative, thought out, intelligent, and relatable, funny, and as close to touching as the film gets. It is some terrific, terrific acting work. The invention and the creation and the detail, I think, are just extremely significant and well done. Jim, Matt didn't see it. Any thoughts on Emma Stone and Poor Things?
You said it perfectly. I would vote for Emma Stone. I root for Lily Gladstone. I really did like Lily Gladstone's performance, but
She's great.
I also 100% agree with you. I think that Emma Stone, a tour de force performance, I think that is exactly the right word.
So Jim and I both have Emma Stone. We could have had our first clean sweep if this wasn't the only movie that Matt missed.
I did put Anatomy of a Fall, Sandra Hüller. Her acting skill is allowing me to think that she's not doing much in that regard. And it's a very convincing human. I appreciate that acting in that role quite a bit.
So yeah, I completely agree. She's fabulous. She did not make my top 5, but not because bad, just because some of these other performances just rose above it. From a technical point of view, she needs to master multiple languages and the lived-in quality of this person. And then top of that, all the emotional, like, you know you're innocent, but you're being tried, and like that paranoia build. It's excellent work, Jim.
So much of that movie is right on her shoulders. And I think she does it very well. I think this is a performance that is specifically designed where you can't really ever emotionally connect with her. You have to have a degree of suspicion around her. So she has to keep things a little bit distant.
Jim's analysis is great. I love that.
And my analysis was just like, average or below average.
That's correct.
Drinking. So in that scenario, Jim, you get to go first. Who should have been nominated that was not?
Greta Lee. The weight of this role, showing us the same person at 2 very different ages and where she is in her life. I think she does this incredibly well. The same woman with 2 very different interior lives was so strong, really elevated the script.
I'm going to be very careful here. There's someone I know and have directed, and a scene that Jim wrote in a web series that we did, and he doesn't remember that she was in it. I don't think it's a bad performance. I have a hard time arguing this should be amongst these 5. There were choices that she made, or the director made, or they made together, that I might have tried differently. And it's not that bad, but I mean, like, I saw the potential for more other different. The potential wasn't realized, I think, is maybe the best way to put it. Maddie P. Greta Lee in Past Lives.
She was also my should have been nominated but wasn't.
So for the first time tonight, we have some synergy in the should have been nominated category. Anything you'd like to add, Maddie?
I do appreciate Jim's separating the 2 ages and calling that out. I didn't put that in my notes in particular, but I totally agree with it. The reason I called it out, in addition to those things, was the other conflict she's dealing with. The task of maintaining 2 relationships that may conflict with each other, but also don't, and doing it in secret, but also in plain sight. And those things are like kind of hard to navigate, and portraying them in a way that feels authentic and fair to everyone involved.
For someone that I know to be gifted, she falls victim to the tone of the film that I complained about earlier. This very, very dry tone that becomes a stylization all its own. This restraint that goes too far. And I think the performance sort of, falls in line with that. On tone, on brand for the film, that didn't quite work for me. You know, she gets mentioned a lot for a snub, but mine is not, because very few people have seen mine. I will say that Kelly will agree with me on this one. It's a film that she said just missed her top 10 last year and was my number 5 film of the year last night. I fully feel like the actress Eve Hewson has arrived, fulfilling the promise she showed glimpses of in small roles over the years in John Carney's film Flora and Son, available on Apple Plus. That single mother that's saddled with responsibility way too young, and the conflict of motherhood versus her own dreams. In this film, it's deeply felt and communicated. Both the physical and emotional aspects of the character mastered, not to mention the singing. She's a complete person with dimension, with humor and pathos, desires and frustration. I think it's some terrific work that should have been acknowledged. More people should have seen this film, Flora and Son, but I really wanted to acknowledge Eve Hewson. I could name 8 powerhouse performances by actresses in 2023, and to me, this is my second favorite anyway. Is there any chance anybody saw Flora and Son on Apple Plus? No. Or is it Apple TV Plus? I'm not sure what to call it.
No, I want to.
All right, so that is easy for that one. Jim, between Emma Stone and Greta Lee.
Emma Stone.
And Maddie P between Greta Lee and Sandra Hüller. And I too have Emma Stone. So we're dangerously close to some agreement here and there, guys, but we still haven't quite gotten any clean sweeps. It's time to move on to leading actor. It's another category that's hard to predict, I think. A month ago, it seemed like Paul Giamatti had a slight edge since Oppenheimer was going to win so many other awards, plus Giamatti's long career of being universally admired. But all the precursors here are pointing towards Cillian Murphy in part of the Oppenheimer sweep. It would have shocked me 2 months ago, but I've gotten around to accepting it. I'm 60-40 on this one, Murphy versus Giamatti, but right now I'm saying Murphy. Does anybody disagree Cillian Murphy will win here?
I still have Paul Giamatti.
Jim, explain your reasoning for Giamatti. It's the same reason I was hinting at?
Yeah, it seems like a coin toss between them.
So what we got to find out is who should win. Maddie P.
Bradley Cooper. I was torn because it does feel sort of artificial, and this is my Oscar role. Feels like very heavy-handed directorially. But at the same time, it's very hard to fake a profession that takes years and years of practice to do. And I bought that he knew how to conduct.
6 years working on that.
And it shows. He seemed to have muscle memory that he wouldn't otherwise have, except for the effort he put into it. I appreciated this on those levels, and I kind of bought into it.
Glad you brought it up in the sense that it allows me the opportunity to once again bring up what I tell a lot of my acting students, the two sides to a performance that we need to talk about, the technical and the emotional. To your point, so impressive the amount of work he put into the technical. However, emotionally, it's a complete failure. It's interesting seeing him in the same movie with Carey Mulligan, who did make my top 5 actresses of the year. I would want to show actors this movie. He's doing the technical, she's doing both, and see the difference. I understand he had more technical to do in terms of learning this whole other craft. I get that. And, you know, the voice and the walk and all those things are part of the technical that he did work on very hard. But it doesn't matter if you don't master those emotional things as well. And it falls into the trap that a lot of these other biopics do. To me, like Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, is it comes down to imitation. I appreciate all the study and the effort when the conducting, the posture, the gait, the voice, but none of it matters if the emotional beats feel false, and they do for him. And I think the compare and contrast with the Carey Mulligan is a great exercise for young actors.
Jonathan, I fall closer to your side, and I agree that there is a technical level of mastery. There's often an issue when you have somebody directing themselves. They're going to look at the way they want the performance to be instead of inhabiting and doing the moment-to-moment work of actually being in that performance.
Especially with a role that complex, with all the bells and whistles that come along with that role, whether it's the makeup or the conducting or all those things. You need a spare set of eyes.
All of these challenges added up.
It was almost like myopic. He was so focused on all those other things that he missed the meat. To me, and it sounds like to some degree, Jim.
Well, I'm glad you called out the technical versus emotional because it's an important distinction, and I can easily see that. And I'm also glad you pointed out it's more than just conducting. I know I said conducting because it's the most obvious thing, but I think it's really impressive how his overall relationship with music, even when not conducting, was just part of like the way he thought and talked, and it just came through, and that was the most important part. So I do like it on a technical level, and emotionally, I think he connected with the music very strongly. But I would agree, I didn't connect with him emotionally to support what you're saying, because it's so focused on that.
Jim, who do you have for who should win?
So for should win, I actually have Jeffrey Wright. His performance was nuanced and complex. He always brings a level of readability into what he's doing. You can see him thinking and working moment to moment.
So, I mean, like, as I've intimated, I actually think 3 of these performances in this category are actually bad, and I have 0 of these in my top 5. But thank God there is some agreement, because I also have Jeffrey Wright here as should win in this category. I didn't find the performance transcendent or anything, but I did feel like he was usual brilliant self. I can always count on Jim for being even more long-winded than myself, and so he covered a lot of the ground. So I mean, it was not only about finding the character, but also the mocked version of that character, his other half, as it were, and both of which were done believably. The latter with this sort of knowing twinkle, this self-awareness, more complicated than it looks. Out of these 5, I would vote for it, but I think there's some great performances that they're missing, which I'll get to at least one of them. Matty P, what do you think about Jeffrey Wright?
I don't disagree with anything you guys said. He's incredible, and this movie was also very enjoyable to watch. It's not small part because of him. The reason I wouldn't have picked him on my own is because there's a section of the film where it's sillier. I felt it was a little too silly and not believable when he was doing some impersonating in front of people, and it felt like a little slapsticky in a way. It didn't resonate with me, and I don't know, who to blame for that, but that's just what kept me away from the gold standard of this category.
I wonder if that has something to do with my comments about the script tonal balance issues. But I didn't see it in his performance so much.
The front-facing thing was, I didn't like those scenes, and he was doing those scenes.
Who should have been nominated for Best Actor that was not Jim?
I went back to All of Us Strangers, Andrew Scott, finding the place of a character who is desperately trying to find connection. He makes it believable. He makes it painful. You can see him work again through all of these stages of opening up in degrees and then realizing what has been taken from him. I found it a heartbreaking, emotional performance.
I'm glad you brought him up, because I was not going to. He is my number 2 actor of the year. I have him ranked 2nd. Extremely impressive in channeling all the confusion, childhood trauma played out as an adult, which is all about covering, and covering some more. But when confronted with our parents again, alive or otherwise, regression is inevitable. And I think he played that beautifully. It's some wonderful, nuanced work. Thank you for mentioning it. Matt, I don't think you've seen All of Us Strangers, right?
No.
Matty P, who do you have as leading actor that should have been nominated that was not?
I don't know. This is more just like, well, why wasn't he kind of snubbed kind of mentality about it? But I just put Leonardo DiCaprio. It seems like he should have been.
Well, Leo is my 3rd Best Actor of the year. So Jim had my 2nd and you had my 3rd.
I thought he did great.
It's so difficult to play not bright. He does it really well. And I think it was Kelly who's actually explained it better last night. He takes the time, and in the edit, they allow the time. Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker's editor gives him the time to think. He's constantly processing and trying to understand things. And I think that really helps build this character. He's so terrible, but at the same time, he's so easy manipulated by other people, other more intelligent people. So you have this empathy, I think, because of his performance. Like, he does what he's told because he doesn't know any better to some degree. And I felt that on a very visceral level. One of the main reasons why the film ranked as high as 11 for me. Jim, Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon.
No, I think it's a solid choice. I love that description of him knowing how to play not smart, especially when you have an actor that smart.
It takes a lot of intelligence to play lack of intelligence.
100%.
I appreciate what you said about the editor and the actor working together to show that pause between thought and delivery.
Well, the actor did it, but it takes a lot of guts to hold on it. And the actor still executed it.
I totally agree. It's like a hidden craft.
So I've got a possible shocker here. A lot of the times, like, my choices come from movies you guys haven't seen because they're small movies. But in this case, this might be a movie that you haven't seen because it's actually quite a big movie. And Kelly actually is on board with this choice for Best Actor of the Year. But I feel like Tom Blythe delivers a star-making tour de force performance in Hunger Games, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Nobody told this young man that he was in a YA action film. He thought he was playing a 3-dimensional character, and I think his work is a lesson to any actor that doesn't take these roles as seriously. The way his goals and his fears intertwine are delicately apparent and undeniably human. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the movie that the Star Wars The Phantom Menace wanted to be. A prequel about the making of a villain, and this one is done with intelligence, care, empathy, and realism. In spite of the world of Panam being fictional, his journey is painfully real and executed with great acting skill. It's my number 1 leading actor performance of the year. Between the two, Jim is more likely to have seen Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Oh, God damn it. You're going to make me watch a Hunger Games movie. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I will watch the Hunger Games movie now.
Matty P.
Not only did I not see this, but I haven't seen any Hunger Games movies.
Jim, your preference, Jeffrey Wright or Andrew Scott for Best Actor of the Year?
You know what? I would actually go Andrew Scott.
Leonardo DiCaprio or Bradley Cooper?
Leo.
And I've got Tom Blythe as my best actor of the year. Andrew Scott 2, Leonardo DiCaprio 3. So we got some crossover there. Big 2 coming up. Here are the nominees for Best Direction of the Year. I've got 0 of these 5 in my top 5. This is another slam dunk, so hopefully this will be quick. Christopher Nolan will finally get his Oscar. Does anybody disagree with that?
Nope.
Christopher Nolan will win.
Jim, who should win?
For should win, I have Jonathan Glazer for Zone of Interest. You have to really believe in your project to create this clinical, dissecting view of this world to try and understand how these people could do what they do. Direction really met and bolstered the story.
There are 2 directors on this list. I've hated all of their films, and one who I hate most of their films. Jonathan Glazer is one of them. I hate everything he touches, like with including Zone of Interest. But one of my notes is at least Jonathan Glazer is consistent in being obnoxious and pretentious in his film. It's not just a passing thing. There must be some freedom in not having any interest in your audience, actively hating them. I think he's condescending. I think he's obnoxious. It's not my least favorite of the 10 Best Picture nominees, but it's 9th of the 10. There's some technical craft to it. I think the cinematography is strong. I'm surprised that wasn't nominated, but I really, really dislike this film and this director as a whole. Matty P, Jonathan Glazer for the Zone of Interest.
I might want to abstain from this discussion, but I also said he should have won. You feel like he makes things in order to condescend to his audience. I don't read that at all from his movies. He's one of the directors who has an idea, has a vision, understands the craft of filmmaking from the visual and the sound and the composition, all the sort of things that go into make a movie. Whether you like his aesthetic or not, I do feel like he buys into the concept and a vision that is kind of singular, and he goes with it. A lot of times they're kind of unique or shocking or just different.
Sometimes they're just to be unique or shocking or different.
I do not know that for sure, but I don't feel that when I'm watching it. I don't feel like he's doing something to make me feel bad about being an audience member. But I do feel like he's good at immersion. You're inside of it, and if you don't want to get inside of it, then you're not going to get inside of it. But if you are, he fully commits to the idea that he has, and knows how to execute it.
So, I mean, yeah, no, obviously I'm on the opposite side of this. I completely disagree. It's just the vision that I question. And I also feel like it's very often not motivated by the story. If there is a story, I don't think there's even a story here.
This movie, it doesn't really have that narrative thrust that maybe you're looking for, but it certainly is an aquarium of an atmosphere he's creating.
I personally didn't feel condescended to. The narrative to me is we're trying to figure out how human beings can commit these atrocities. What about them made them so desensitized, so numb?
And did you feel like you got some revelation on that? Because I didn't. I don't think it truly explored it. There was no perspective on that.
That is kind of the point. The amount of barbarity and cruelty and inhumanity is almost too big to fathom.
Just hearing you say that makes me think of a cop-out. Like it feels like a cop-out.
You know what? Most of the time, I think I might agree with you. But in this case, I think it really works.
So they have agreement who should win here, but I'm on an island once again for the 4th time tonight, it sounds like. And as I've mentioned a few times tonight, Killers of the Flower Moon turned out to be my number 11 film of the year. So out of these 5, I will select Martin Scorsese, who I would vote for in this category. Obviously, he didn't make my top 5 directors of the year, but it was a very accomplished film. And out of these 5, that's what I have to acknowledge. Great performances across the board, in debt to the director to a large degree, including 2 performances that made my top 5. So we talked about Leo, we did not talk about De Niro, and one that just missed in terms of Lily Gladstone. So some great performances, but also the camera was always in the right place at the right time, narratively speaking, carefully telling the story cinematically, using the form to bring out the themes. You can obviously see there's a pattern here to what I'm looking for. To me, that's what direction's all about. This checks all the boxes.
I don't disagree. I mean, it's a great movie for all the reasons you said, and I think it does check a lot of boxes, and it does so successfully.
I don't think there's an argument that you can have against Scorsese. I think I agree absolutely with what you said. The movie that Martin Scorsese made a beautiful movie. I think you're 100% right. The camera was always in the correct space. He was telling the story incredibly well.
All right, so that's not too bad. So now we're looking, should have been nominated, that was not. All right, so and that brings us to Matty P.
Well, this is sort of another one I'm boring, like, well, why wasn't it nominated or why wasn't they? So I just did Greta because that's the trend of why was she snubbed here. It struck a really great balance between Toyland and reality and like blending those two things in a way that was believable, but also fantastical. Also infusing that with the sort of high concept of that with like relevant topics and character arcs that seemed accessible because it's humorous, but also like thought provoking because they were nuanced. So she did blend a lot of things that generally aren't blended together in a movie like this. She did a great job.
Out of my 5 top directors of the year, 3 of them are women, and one of them is Greta Gerwig, in spite of our personal differences. It's a fully realized film. Like it was a big swing, visionary to some degree. And so I think it really worked. And I do think, in terms of direction, in terms of all the things we talk about, tone and performances, it was very skillfully done. And it is, like I said, it is a top 5 direction. I have her third. 2 that I have ahead of it, you probably haven't seen. Don't disagree. She should have been nominated, not for political reasons. I do think it's one of the top 5 directorial jobs of the year. So I agree from that point of view. I just have a couple I have ahead of her. Jim, Greta Gerwig.
Maddie and I also agree on this. I have Greta as my should have been nominated for the reason that we talked about. She had a fully realized movie. She did a great job of world building and creating, a fantasy land and contrasting it with reality. And larger, you said that she took a big swing, the unlikeliest big swing of them all, to be like, well, it's a doll. The themes that were discussed in the film were intelligible. They were on point. And they made sense within the larger world, and that they were relevant to us as well.
As much as I feel like she should have been nominated because she's one of my top 5 directors, she's not my number 1. And this film that I have for my best director of the year is my number 2 film of the year, and is a film that Kelly and Talia excoriated me for. Like, they went off on me, and Talia says she can't speak to me for a while as a result of liking this film. They angrily, if you watched the show last night, you know that they angrily called me names and said I had no right to be in a film talk show because of my love of this film. But I remain steadfast in my belief, talking about a big swing, in my belief that Wonka is an extraordinary achievement. Fun, joyful, smart, and important. Moments into this film, Timothée Chalamet slides down and around a flagpole in his new city of Paris, and I'm immediately hooked. To me, Wonka, directed by Paul King, has everything. The visuals are breathtaking, magical, and it's very consistent from a world-building point of view. The actors all understand the tone and execute it believably with just the right balance of comedy and pathos. But most importantly, it's about something. Where the original story was a borderline threat to children and the rewards that come from good behavior, and vice versa, this iteration is significantly more inspirational. This is a film that captures and lionizes the entrepreneurial spirit without shying away from the challenges and pitfalls there within. It is also a condemnation of the loopholes in capitalism that allows for potential collusion and monopolies. Yes, it's about bullies of a more realistic kind, adult and financial type of bully. I understand that sounds like a lot in a movie made for children, but it's a valid, ultimately positive message wrapped in cotton candy colors from an imaginative, creative team. Like Barbie, it's a wholly unique vision, inventive and comprehensive. The primary complaint I got last night was how far afield it was from Gene Wilder's interpretation of the character in 1971. Taken aback by the vitriol I was receiving, I failed to provide the counter-argument that I should have. Chalamet's creation was the wide-eyed dreamer before the world made Wonka more cynical and suspicious. The whole point of the golden ticket in that movie was to try and find hope in a new generation again. In that sense, Chalamet's Wonka is really more like Charlie. At all that to make the point that I think Paul King, as a writer-director, made something so much more than a kid's movie musical. It has all the humor and heart you'd want from that, but also dazzling visuals and relevant thematic importance. We talk all the time, or I talk all the time, about movies that are entertaining, but also thematically important. And how do you combine that? That's the hardest thing to do of all. And this is the film, one of the films this year that does it. My number 2 film of the year. Any chance either of you guys saw Wonka?
I did not. But if it makes you feel any better, I'm so happy that it wasn't Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
So Jim, Greta Gerwig or Jonathan Glazer?
I'd still probably go Jonathan Glazer.
Maddie, Poilis, Greta Gerwig or Jonathan Glazer?
I don't know. I'll just say Glazer.
They have Glazer and I have Paul King. So they have the nominees and I have, that X Factor. All right, now the big granddaddy of the night. The best picture of 2023. Here are the nominees here. There's 10 of them. I don't expect any argument that Oppenheimer is going to win here. I heard some people floating a theory that Gerwig's omission would spearhead a surge in Barbie votes. But as it stands, it's not even ranked second in most polls. It's down to 6th in Vegas odds. And so for me, it's Oppie all the way in terms of predictions. Does anybody disagree that Oppenheimer's a slam dunk here?
Oh.
No, but Oscar poll people, we're all saying Oppenheimer's going to win here. And Maddie P, what should win in this category?
I'm going to say Killers of the Flower Moon. It balances a lot of things really well. It has like the quiet moments and the big moments, and it has the big sweeping cinematic feel, but also it's about a small number of people in a small area. It's exciting. It is also contemplative. It's doing a lot of things in a way that it's hard to do.
It's my second favorite of these 10 Best Picture nominees, but it's very accomplished, and I've already talked about Martin Scorsese's direction. It's very, very good. I feel less passionate about it than I do my top 10 films of the year. Like, I acknowledge it. It's craft. It's good. It's important. A little quibbles here and there. Keep it off. Jim, Killers of the Flower Moon.
It's a good movie. It wasn't my choice. I think for me in terms it was fairly middle of the pack for those 10 films. But it's a solid choice. I think it all comes down to me for when we talked about the screenplay. The other elements in constructing that film, I really did like.
All right, so that brings us to Jim. What should win here?
I mean, I think from the way I might have given away the game category ago when I said I can just go on and on about this film. I really thought Zone of Interest was something special and different. There's a category of movies that I am like, that was an amazing movie I'm never going to watch again. And I think that Zone of Interest, this movie, such a compelling point of view. I can't remember seeing a movie like this. And the questions that I had at the end of it really hooked me into the movie. And I think that's what it's designed to do, is to make you start questioning a whole lot about history and where we're at and how we look at things.
We've talked about this movie a lot at this point. I obviously disagree on a lot of different counts. The part about it being different, I personally feel like it's different for different sake, and it didn't come from within the narrative. I appreciate you don't want to watch it again. I really don't want to ever watch. I would be okay never watching a Jonathan Glazer again, but I don't think as a film reviewer I'm going to get to avoid that. Matty P, you also admire this film, Zone of Interest.
I do, for a lot of similar reasons, as Jim has already said. It's a point of view, a filmic point of view, and also a social point of view that are just not seen, and putting them together is particularly interesting, or off-putting perhaps, but I think an intentional way. An experience and a situation that you're existing in to be somewhere else, and observe.
Only one Best Picture nominee made my top 10 list, which is the lowest amount ever. To me, Barbie is one of the most fully realized visionary films of the years. Like Wonka, it has thorough world building from the top down: direction, script, performance, design, music. Its primary drawback to me is the occasional heavy-handedness. Some of the speech-making felt pandering. Perhaps this is one of those films that Jim has talked about that's meant to shake up the supposed lowest common denominator, and maybe that heavy-handedness was necessary. I don't personally agree, but it's a small quibble. Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie are pitch perfect for what was asked for. Both committed fully to the vision of Gerwig and Baumbach, and the movie is all the better for it. The feminism is what everyone talks about, and it's a theme that's sometimes a little on the nose, but one of the more effective surprises is its commentary on codependency, which in its own way adds balance to the complicated sexual politics that it dares to tackle. For all its sharp wit and humor, I also found myself moved and saddened in many different ways. Not that it addressed anything new, but the looking in that mirror is sobering, and for that and its complete vision, I see this as my nemesis is Greta Gerwig's most successful effort yet. Pains me to say it. It's my number 8 film of 2023, so not high in the top 10, but the only Best Picture nominee on this list to make the top 10. I've got Barbie here. What do you guys have any thoughts that you'd like to share, or that we haven't talked about yet?
Other than your humble brag about knowing Greta Gerwig, I think that was a great summary and review of the movie.
I don't know if I'm bragging. I would rather I didn't, given our interaction history.
Like Matty said, I think that was a great summary and overview of the movie for all the reasons why it was nominated.
One more thing to really discuss, and that's what should have been nominated that was not. And so maybe we'll find out if these are their favorite films of the year, or if it is The Zone of Interest or Killers of the Flower Moon. Jim, what should have been nominated that was not?
So I've mentioned this movie a couple of times today. All of Us Strangers, a big overlook that this movie did not get more attention, especially in the Best Picture category.
And it's my number 10 film of the year, so I can't disagree. I would also nominate it if I had 10 nominations. But it's very personal. I think I mentioned earlier, it's beautiful, deeply felt work. It's an obviously high-minded, mostly well-crafted, very emotional and layered film.
It's a small, beautiful film.
It's my top 10, so not much disagreement there. So Matty P, what is your film that should have been nominated that was not, that you liked?
I'm going to go to my fallback plan B of Asteroid City. Anyway, I was delighted by that movie more often than not. I appreciated the 3 layers of various times and places in cinematography, but I also was confused some of the time, whatever. But I also was delighted by it more often than not.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit. I mean, like, I liked it more than I liked a lot of Wes Anderson films. This one was a little more interesting to me, a lot going on thematically. Like, I thought I was in this movie, and the really end sort of like seemed to undo a lot of the thematic work that it was doing. So he lost me late in the film. As you might expect, however, like there's a wonderful use of the mise en scène, combining reflexive ideas with stop motion animation, with intertextuality, winking to Warner Brothers cartoons, films like Ace in the Hole, among others. Watchable. I'm not sure I'm going to rewatch this one. Jim, anything more you want to say about Asteroid City?
I could easly see a world where this had gotten a best picture nomination.
And we call that world Maddie's World. All right, guys, it's time for my should have been nominated, that was not, and I'm sure it's another indie that you guys didn't see, especially this year. The Independent Spirit Awards have different eligibility rules than the Oscars, so it often happens that film I watched for one year's Spirits Awards don't become eligible for Oscars until the following year. And that's the case with my number 1 film of the year. I was disappointed last year when I was going to, put it in my top 10 and nominate it. And, but it wasn't on the list of last year's films, but it did pop up on this year's list. And so for all the joy and good spirits baked within the majority of my top 10, this film is not for the faint of heart. It grabs you by the neck and forces you to confront the deepest recesses of your soul. I'm referring to French indie Our Father the Devil, about an African refugee woman living in France whose world gets thrown into chaos when a man who abused her as a youth and killed her family in her home country reappears in her life in France as the new town priest. And he's not disingenuous either. He's a monster who had an epiphany of clarity and decided to atone for his heinous crimes by devoting his life to God and in service of others. More than any other film I've ever seen, it forces us to ask if there are crimes that are beyond forgiveness, no matter what. And by extension, are there then traumas that we can never recover from? And then the other question is there a level of violence that is ever justifiable? And is there any extent of revenge that can help you to feel better, or is that a slippery slope? So many questions posed in the film with no real easy answers, if any, all stemming from man's inexplicable inhumanity to man, and specifically here, the continued global multifaceted abuse of women. The performances are breathtaking, only adding to a heart-wrenching, gripping, unforgettable, challenging film. Jim talked about the challenges and complications of Zone of Interest, how that almost passively depicted man's inhumanity to man. It seems like I'm looking for a film that challenges it more directly. Is there any possibility you guys saw the French indie Our Father the Devil?
I did not see it, but I remember seeing it on the list and going, I have to see that movie.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. Sounds pretty intense.
So now it's time for preferences. So Jim, it's Zone of Interest or All of Us Strangers?
I think Zone of Interest.
Maddie P?
Let's give it to Wes since they enter Asteroid City.
But mine is Our Father the Devil, as I mentioned, was my number 1 film of the year. So real quick, I'm going to do a lightning round of the craft categories. These guys are welcome to comment or not. And this year I did see the shorts, the live action and animated, so I can talk about that a little bit. For animated short, will win. A lot of odds makers are saying the Letter to a Pig, but if anybody actually watches the shorts, and I think they will, I think War is Over, inspired by the songs of John and Yoko, I think it will win and should win. Should have been nominated as a short called I'm Hip. Live action short, Maddie Poilis' favorite. What will win, I think, is The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, because everyone has heard of Wes Anderson, and it's on Netflix. What should win is a short called Night of Fortune, which should have been nominated as a short called Armoire. Makeup, what will win is Maestro. What should win, Society of the Snow. What should have been nominated, Naiad. Costume design, will win Barbie. Should win Poor Things. Should have been nominated, Wonka. Animated feature, will win Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Should win Elemental. Should have been nominated, Leo. Production design, will win and should win Barbie. Should have been nominated, Wonka again. Editing, will win Oppenheimer. Should win Anatomy of a Fall. Should have been nominated Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Documentary will win 20 Days in Mariupol. Should win Four Daughters. Should have been nominated It Ain't Over, the documentary about Yogi Berra. Song will win and should win What Am I Made For from Barbie. Should have been nominated Meet in the Middle from Flora and Son. Score. I said there were two things that I liked about Oppenheimer, Robert Downey Jr. and the score. So will win and should win. Ludwig Göransson's score for Oppenheimer should have been nominated for score. All of Us Strangers has, to me, the best score of 2023. And Matty Poilis, you're a sound designer. I didn't do sound. If you've got thoughts on that.
It might be an obvious answer because it's getting everything else craft-wise, but Oppenheimer actually did have quite good scenes with sound design. It used elements of like Geiger counters and odd sounds here and there, part of the score and the sound design and soundscape. Also, there's some notable scenes that omitted sound in very effective ways. I was really struck by a couple of sequences and how they broke expectations of what sound would do or when, like the explosion and the delay. And then there's a speech one I remember where he was giving a big impassioned speech and there was some heavy-handed but very effective sound design. Yeah, I actually noticed that one, even though it's like the obvious choice.
I mean, I'm glad that you gave a shout out to Dungeons and Dragons. It really is a fun film. It's really so much better than it ever needed to be.
What makes it good is the editing, like the pacing, the balancing of all those characters. It's an achievement in editing, I think, and that's why it was my #1 edited film of the year.
Yep.
So that's the end of our Oscar preview. We got one more show to end this season. It's our classic year in a review. That's tomorrow night. Our 1998 review. We're going to go back 25 years and talk about the Oscar races from that year with Mel and Angelo. With that in mind, kids, let's say goodbye to the audience.
Bye, audience.
Burrito time.
Okay. He's in the central time zone there. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned. And I'll see you tomorrow night.